Alright, Jammer here with a review of Shovel Knight, a downloadable title recently released for the Wii U, 3DS, and Windows, and it's a fantastic homage to some of the classic 8-bit 2D action platformers of the late 80s and early 90s, and one that is just packed with content and plenty of new ideas of its own. This is a modern yet retro platformer, so I would be remiss not to mention its influences, mainly Capcom's Mega Man and DuckTales titles and Konami's Castlevania games, though gameplay progression feels a bit like Zelda or Metroid, since as you progress, you could obtain more and more health and magic points, and get new abilities that oftentimes help with overcoming some of the stage's challenges. The story is that Shovel Knight has been in retirement from questing ever since his partner, Shield Knight, disappeared under mysterious circumstances. However, he is brought back to his chivalrous shoveling duties when the villainous Enchantress and the Order of No Quarter start their reign of terror. Shovel Knight's key tool is, as you might imagine, his shovel, with which he attacks, digs up treasure, finds hidden paths, and platforms by bouncing off of enemies and obstacles like a pogo stick. Its range is pretty limited, but Shovel Knight is aided by magic items, the most useful of which for me is a horizontal fire attack. Some notable additions are the brief invincibility charm and the propeller dagger, which add platforming abilities that can be used in multiple circumstances. And combining Shovel Knight's abilities for platforming and boss fights is quite fun, and the game just controls perfectly. Challenge in the game is handled quite well, with all the difficulty of some of the 8-bit platformers like Mega Man, but without all the frustration, because you have unlimited lives, and on the first playthrough, checkpoints are fairly frequent, but you can gamble and break those checkpoints to get gold, which might be just enough to buy an upgrade in town or a new spell out in a level. Dying does result in a loss of gold, though you can recover some of that gold at the point of death, and I really like this setup. I don't think keeping track of lives and continues is really needed in console platformers anymore. New Game Plus, however, reduces the number of checkpoints and increases the amount of damage that Shovel Knight takes, and it definitely adds some replay value for those really looking for a tough challenge. The game is overflowing with quirky style and terrible puns, which I appreciate immensely. The levels are colorful and display impressive contrast and unusual palettes, which remind me of the old NES games. Sprite work is quite well done, and the music is incredibly catchy. Each stage is also unique, and some of the platforming can be quite tricky, and there are numerous hidden areas that are just there to dare the player to complete in order to pick up bonus pickups. I didn't find the bosses to be quite as brutal as, say, playing a Mega Man game for the first time, but they are still challenging and have a large number of moves. I will say, though, that without the fire magic ability, I think I would have had a much harder time with the bosses. And early on, before too many life upgrades are available, the bosses can be pretty tricky. In general, I found that I needed to play well in order to get far in this game, but it wasn't too punishing or frustrating if I wasn't quite on my game. As I mentioned, this is a content-rich game, and there are multiple optional bosses and stages to challenge yourself and get more gold. One thing that bears mentioning, though, for me personally, it really wasn't a big deal. This is a kickstarted game, and I didn't really encounter most of the stretch goals, but maybe those are buried deep into the game and require more completion, or maybe those will be released sometime down the line. But I really couldn't be happier with the game, so I highly recommend Shovel Knight, and it makes me really excited for some other kickstarted video games. And this could be the year for this type of funding to prove itself when it comes to video games, as Shovel Knight is excellent, and I'll certainly be keeping an eye out for a couple other Kickstarter games that interest me, Hyper Light Drifter and Ghost Song. Well, have a good one.